The world of cinema has always been shaped by legends, those rare souls whose presence on screen transcends mere performance and becomes a part of our collective memory. But every legend, no matter how bright, must one day face the final curtain. On September 16, 2025, the world lost Robert Redford, a man whose life was as complex and compelling as any character he ever played. His passing at the age of 89 sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond, leaving fans, friends, and family grappling with a silence that felt almost impossible to fill. Yet, behind the headlines and the tributes, there lies a story far more intricate, a story of triumph and tragedy, of public adoration and private pain, of a man who spent his life balancing the weight of expectation with the fragility of the human heart. Robert Redford was not just an actor. He was a force of nature, a visionary who redefined what it meant to be a star. From his earliest days he seemed destined for greatness, yet the path he walked was anything but easy. Born in Santa Monica, California, in 1936, Redford's childhood was marked by both promise and peril. The son of a milkman and a homemaker, he grew up in the shadow of the Great Depression, learning early on that life could be both beautiful and brutally unfair. Even as a boy, he was drawn to the world of art and imagination, sketching scenes from his window and dreaming of distant horizons. But fate, as it so often does, had other plans. At the age of 10, Redford was struck by polio, a disease that threatened to steal not just his mobility, but his very sense of self. For months he lay confined to his bed, his legs refusing to obey, his spirit tested by pain and uncertainty. It was his mother, Martha, who became his anchor during those dark days, massaging his legs, whispering words of hope, and refusing to let him surrender to despair. Resilience, Redford would later say, isn't about never falling. It's about getting up again and again, no matter how many times life knocks you down. That lesson, learned in the quiet agony of a child's sick room, would become the foundation of his life. As he grew older, Redford's restlessness only intensified. The bright lights of Los Angeles beckoned, but so did the shadows. He fell in with a rough crowd, testing boundaries, searching for something he couldn't quite name. There were nights of reckless abandon, brushes with the law, and moments when the future seemed to hang by a thread. Yet, even in his wildest moments, there was a spark, a sense that he was meant for something more. It was his father, Charles, who finally intervened, steering his son away from the edge and back toward the promise of a new beginning. Sports became Redford's salvation. On the tennis courts of Los Angeles, he found discipline and purpose, even warming up with legends like Pancho Gonzalez. But just as he began to find his footing, tragedy struck again. At 18, Redford lost his mother to complications from surgery, a loss so profound that it would haunt him for the rest of his life. The house that had once been filled with laughter and light became a place of silence and sorrow. His father, never one for words, retreated into himself, leaving Redford to navigate the storm of grief alone. It was in this crucible of pain and longing that Redford's true character began to emerge. He threw himself into art, traveling through Europe, painting, sketching, and searching for meaning in the ruins of ancient cities. The loneliness was overwhelming at times, but it was also liberating. Sometimes, he would later reflect, you have to lose everything to find out who you really are. By the time he returned to New York in his mid-20s, Redford was no longer just a boy with a dream. He was a survivor, hardened by loss but still hungry for life. New York in the late 1950s was a city alive with possibility, and for Robert Redford it was both a proving ground and a sanctuary. He arrived with little more than a suitcase, a portfolio of sketches, and a stubborn belief that art could save him. The city was unforgiving, its streets crowded with dreamers and cynics alike, but Redford was undeterred. He enrolled at the Pratt Institute to study painting, immersing himself in color and form, but it was the stage that ultimately called to him. Acting at first was simply another way to escape the weight of his past, but soon it became clear that he possessed a rare gift, a presence that could command attention even in the smallest of roles. The early years were anything but glamorous. Redford scraped by on bit parts in television shows like Maverick and Perry Mason, often struggling to pay the rent. Casting directors were quick to dismiss him as just another pretty face. too handsome to be taken seriously, too polished to have depth. The irony was bitter. The very features that would one day make him a star were in those days a curse. It was a gilded cage, he would later say. You're inside, but no one thinks you belong. Yet Redford refused to be defined by other people's expectations. Every rejection became fuel, every setback a lesson in perseverance. Then in 1963, everything changed. Redford landed the lead role in Neil Simon's Barefoot in the Park on Broadway, opposite Elizabeth Ashley. Night after night, he brought a blend of wit, vulnerability, and quiet strength to the stage, earning rave reviews and for the first time genuine recognition. The play was a sensation, running for years and launching Redford into the national spotlight. But for him the real victory was not the applause, but the validation. For the first time, he recalled, they saw me not just what I looked like, but who I was. Hollywood soon came calling, and Redford transitioned to film with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The early roles were modest, but his breakthrough came with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969. Paired with Paul Newman, Redford's performance as the charming, rebellious Sundance Kid captured the imagination of audiences around the world. The film was a box office smash, and Redford was suddenly a household name. Yet even as fame enveloped him, he remained wary. The wounds of his past, the losses, the doubts, the constant need to prove himself, never fully healed. Instead, they became the hidden engine driving his choices. Throughout the 1970s, Redford's star continued to rise. He delivered iconic performances in films like The Sting, The Way We Were, and All the President's Men, each role revealing new layers of complexity and depth. He was more than just a leading man. He was an artist unafraid to tackle difficult subjects and challenge the status quo. Yet with every success came new pressures. The public adored him, but the industry remained skeptical. Was he truly more than a pretty face? Could he sustain his success, or would he fade like so many before him? Redford answered those questions not with words, but with action. In 1980, he made his directorial debut with Ordinary People, a searing exploration of grief and family dysfunction. The film was a critical and commercial triumph, earning Redford an Academy Award for Best Director. For him, the Oscar was more than a trophy. It was vindication, proof that he belonged not just in front of the camera, but behind it as well. Yet even in victory, he remained humble. Success, he once said, isn't about the applause. It's about the work, the process, the willingness to keep going when everything in you wants to quit. But behind the scenes, Redford's life was far from perfect. The pressures of fame, the relentless scrutiny, and the lingering pain of old wounds took their toll. His marriage to Lola Van Wagenen, which had begun in the innocence of youth, was strained by distance, ambition, and the unrelenting demands of Hollywood. Together, they endured unimaginable heartbreak, the loss of their firstborn son, Scott, a tragedy that left scars no amount of success could ever erase. Redford carried that grief with him always, a silent companion in the brightest and darkest moments of his life. The world saw Robert Redford as a golden icon, a man whose every move seemed touched by destiny. But behind the camera flashes and red carpets, his life was a tapestry woven with both triumph and sorrow. The loss of his son Scott was a wound that never truly healed, a shadow that followed him through every success and every setback. Redford rarely spoke publicly about his grief, but those closest to him knew that it shaped every aspect of his life. He once confided to a friend, "You never get over something like that. You just learn to live around it." The pain became a silent undercurrent, informing his performances, his choices, and his relentless drive to create meaning from chaos. As the years passed, Redford's family grew, but so did the challenges. His son Jamie battled health issues from a young age, enduring multiple surgeries and 2 liver transplants. The hospital corridors became as familiar to Redford as any film set, and the beeping of medical machines replaced the applause of audiences. Through it all, he remained a devoted father, balancing the demands of his career with the needs of his family. The public saw a man in control, but in private, Redford was often racked with worry and exhaustion. The weight of responsibility was immense, yet he bore it with quiet dignity, refusing to let the world see the cracks in his armor. Redford's marriage to Lola, once a source of strength and stability, began to unravel under the strain. The demands of Hollywood, the constant travel and the unspoken grief that lingered between them proved too much to bear. After nearly 3 decades together, they parted ways not with anger or bitterness, but with a sense of inevitability. Redford spoke of Lola with deep respect, calling her the great love of his life, the woman who had stood by him through the darkest storms. Their separation was a private sorrow, one that he carried with him long after the headlines faded. In the midst of personal turmoil, Redford found solace in his work. He poured his energy into projects that mattered, using his platform to champion causes close to his heart. In 1981, he founded the Sundance Institute, a sanctuary for independent filmmakers and a beacon of hope for artists struggling to find their voice. Sundance was more than just a film festival. It was a movement, a rebellion against the commercialism and conformity of mainstream Hollywood. Redford invested his own money, his own reputation, and his own dreams into the project, nurturing it through years of skepticism and financial uncertainty. Friends warned him that he was risking too much, but Redford was undeterred. "If you believe in something," he said, "you fight for it, no matter the cost." Sundance became a lifeline, not just for Redford, but for countless filmmakers whose stories might otherwise have gone untold. It was a place where risk was celebrated, where new voices could be heard, and where art was valued above profit. Redford's commitment to the Institute was unwavering, even as it demanded sacrifices in his personal life. He spent long nights fundraising, mentoring young artists, and defending the festival against those who sought to commercialize its spirit. The work was exhausting, but it gave Redford a sense of purpose that fame alone could never provide. Yet, even as he built a legacy that would outlast him, Redford remained haunted by the ghosts of his past. The deaths of close friends like Natalie Wood and Paul Newman left him reeling, reminders that even the brightest stars are not immune to the ravages of time. Redford mourned them quietly, honoring their memory not with grand gestures, but with the simple act of carrying their lessons forward. "We're all just passing through," he once mused. "What matters is what we leave behind." As the years turned into decades, Redford's own health began to falter. The once vigorous man who had conquered mountains and film sets alike found himself slowing down, his body betraying him in ways he could not control. Yet, even in the face of decline, he refused to surrender to despair. Surrounded by family, friends, and the enduring spirit of Sundance, Redford faced his final days with the same quiet courage that had defined his life. In the twilight of his life, Robert Redford found himself reflecting more deeply than ever on the journey that had brought him from the sunlit streets of Santa Monica to the quiet solitude of his Utah home. The world outside still saw him as a legend, a man whose name was synonymous with integrity, artistry, and a certain rugged American ideal. But within the walls of his home, Redford was simply a father, a grandfather, and a partner, roles that in the end mattered more to him than any award or accolade. The years had softened him, worn away the sharp edges of ambition, and left in their place a profound appreciation for the simple, fleeting moments of connection that make life worth living. His relationship with Sybil Sagers, the German-born artist he married in 2009, brought a new sense of peace and purpose to his later years. Together they created a sanctuary far removed from the chaos of Hollywood, a place where art and nature intertwined, and where the pressures of fame faded into the background. Sybil's quiet strength and creative spirit complemented Redford's own, and their partnership became a source of healing for wounds that had long refused to close. In her, Redford found not just love, but understanding, a rare and precious gift for a man who had spent so much of his life feeling misunderstood. Their home in Utah became a gathering place for family, friends, and fellow artists, a haven where laughter and creativity flourished. Redford delighted in the company of his children and grandchildren, cherishing the opportunity to share stories, wisdom, and the lessons of a life lived fully. He was not a man given to nostalgia, but in those final years, he allowed himself to look back, not with regret, but with gratitude. Every loss, every heartbreak, every triumph had shaped him, forging a resilience that could not be broken, even by the approach of death. Yet, even as he embraced the peace of his later years, Redford remained acutely aware of the world's expectations. The public still hungered for stories, for glimpses into the life of a man who had become a symbol of hope and possibility. Redford understood the power of myth, but he also knew its dangers. The trouble with legends, he once remarked, is that people forget you're human. In his final interviews, he spoke candidly about the challenges of fame, the loneliness that often accompanied success, and the importance of staying true to oneself in a world that constantly demands more. As his health declined, Redford withdrew further from the spotlight, choosing instead to focus on the people and projects that mattered most. He continued to support Sundance, mentoring young filmmakers and advocating for environmental causes close to his heart. The fight to protect the natural world had always been a central part of his identity, and in his last years, it became a mission. He saw in the next generation of artists and activists the same fire that had once driven him, and he took comfort in knowing that his legacy would endure, not just in films, but in the lives he had touched and the movements he had inspired. The final days were marked by a quiet dignity. Surrounded by loved ones, Redford faced the end with the same grace that had defined his life. There were moments of pain, of course, and moments of fear, but there was also an overwhelming sense of acceptance. He spoke often of his mother, of the lessons she had taught him about resilience and hope. He found solace in the rhythms of nature, the changing of the seasons, the play of light on the mountains, the sound of rain against the windows. In those moments he felt connected to something larger than himself, a sense of peace that transcended the boundaries of life and death. On September 16, 2025, as the sun set over the Utah landscape he loved so dearly, Robert Redford took his final breath. The news of his passing spread quickly, igniting a wave of tributes from around the world. Directors, actors, presidents, and fans alike mourned the loss of a true original, a man whose life had been a testament to the power of art, courage, and compassion. But for those who knew him best, the real loss was not the legend, but the man, the father, the husband, the friend whose absence left a void that could never be filled. In the days that followed Robert Redford's passing, the world seemed to pause, as if holding its breath in collective mourning. News outlets replayed his most iconic scenes, social media overflowed with memories and tributes, and film festivals across the globe dimmed their lights in his honor. Yet for all the public displays of grief, the most profound sorrow was felt in the quiet corners of his Utah home, where the echoes of his laughter and the warmth of his presence lingered like a gentle afterglow. His family gathered, sharing stories and tears, each memory a thread in the tapestry of a life that had touched so many. For his children, Shauna, Amy, and Dylan, the loss was both deeply personal and achingly public. They had grown up in the shadow of a legend, their lives shaped by the unique challenges and privileges that came with being Redford's children. Yet beneath the surface, theirs was a family marked by the same joys and struggles as any other. Redford had always tried to shield his loved ones from the harsh glare of fame, insisting on privacy and normalcy whenever possible. He taught his children to value honesty, kindness, and hard work, lessons that would guide them long after his passing. Sybil, his beloved wife, found herself adrift in a sea of memories. The home they had built together, once filled with art and music, now felt impossibly empty. She wandered through the rooms, touching the objects that still bore his imprint, a favorite book, a half-finished painting, a scarf draped over a chair. Grief, she discovered, was not a single moment but 1,000 small reminders, each one a testament to the depth of their bond. Yet even in her sorrow, Sybil drew strength from the love they had shared, a love that had weathered storms and brought healing to them both. As the initial shock of Redford's death began to fade, the world turned its attention to his legacy. What, people wondered, would endure now that the man himself was gone? The answer, as always, was found not in the headlines, but in the lives he had touched. Redford's influence extended far beyond the silver screen. He was a mentor to countless young artists, a champion of independent film, and a tireless advocate for environmental causes. The Sundance Institute, his most enduring creation, continued to thrive, nurturing new generations of storytellers and ensuring that voices from all walks of life could find an audience. Redford's commitment to social and environmental justice was more than a passing interest, it was a calling. He used his fame not as a shield, but as a tool, leveraging his influence to shine a light on issues that mattered. Whether speaking out against political corruption, fighting for the protection of wild lands, or supporting underrepresented filmmakers, Redford never shied away from controversy. He believed that art had the power to change the world, and he dedicated his life to proving it. "If you're not making a difference," he once said, "then what's the point?" In the months after his passing, tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Directors and actors spoke of his generosity and vision. Environmentalists praised his unwavering commitment, and fans shared stories of how his films had changed their lives. Yet for all the accolades, Redford's true legacy was found in the quiet moments, the encouragement he offered to a struggling artist, the time he spent mentoring a young director, the countless acts of kindness that never made the headlines. He understood that greatness was not measured by fame or fortune, but by the impact one has on others. As the seasons changed and the world moved on, Redford's family and friends found solace in the rituals of remembrance. They gathered at Sundance sharing stories and laughter, honoring his memory not with grand gestures, but with the simple act of coming together. In the stillness of the Utah mountains, they felt his presence, a gentle reminder that, though he was gone, his spirit endured in every act of courage, every work of art, every moment of hope. As time moved forward, the world began to see Robert Redford's life not just as a collection of achievements, but as a profound lesson in resilience, authenticity, and the quiet power of endurance. His story became a touchstone for those who had ever felt the sting of loss, the weight of expectation, or the ache of dreams deferred. In the years following his death, retrospectives and documentaries explored every facet of his journey, from the sunlit innocence of his childhood to the hard-won wisdom of his final days. Yet for all the analysis and admiration, the essence of Redford's legacy remained deeply personal, a reminder that greatness is forged not in moments of triumph, but in the willingness to keep moving forward, even when the path is uncertain. For the film industry, Redford's absence was felt like the loss of a guiding star. Directors and actors who had once looked to him for inspiration now found themselves asking how to carry his vision forward. The Sundance Institute, more than ever, became a beacon for those who believed in the transformative power of storytelling. Each year, new voices emerged from the festival, their work shaped by the values Redford had championed: honesty, courage, and a refusal to settle for the easy or the expected. In this way, his influence continued to ripple outward, touching lives he would never know, shaping stories that would outlast even the brightest of spotlights. But perhaps the most enduring impact of Redford's life was felt far from the glare of Hollywood. In communities across the country, people remembered the man who had never forgotten his roots, who had used his fame not to build walls, but to open doors. He was a frequent presence at environmental rallies, a quiet supporter of local artists, a mentor to those who needed guidance more than praise. His generosity was rarely publicized, but those who benefited from it never forgot. In a world often obsessed with image, Redford's authenticity stood as a quiet rebuke, a reminder that true greatness is measured not by what we take, but by what we give. For his family, the process of healing was slow, marked by moments of both sorrow and gratitude. They found comfort in the rituals that had always bound them together: shared meals, long walks in the mountains, evenings spent watching the sun set over the Utah landscape. Redford's grandchildren, too young to fully grasp the magnitude of his legacy, grew up surrounded by stories of his kindness, his humor, and his unwavering belief in the power of hope. In their laughter and curiosity, his spirit lived on, a living testament to the idea that love, once given, never truly disappears. As the years passed, Redford's story became woven into the fabric of American culture. His films continued to inspire new generations, their themes of justice, resilience, and redemption as relevant as ever. Students studied his work in classrooms, aspiring actors quoted his lines in auditions, and filmmakers cited his influence in interviews. Yet for all the public recognition, the most meaningful tributes came from those whose lives he had touched in quiet, unheralded ways. A letter from a young director, a painting from a grateful artist, a simple thank you from someone whose life had been changed by a single act of kindness, these were the echoes of a life well lived. In the end, the shocking truth behind Robert Redford's final days was not found in scandal or sensational headlines, but in the quiet dignity with which he faced the inevitable. He met death as he had met life, with courage, humility, and an unshakable belief in the possibility of renewal. His final moments were not marked by regret, but by a sense of completion, a recognition that for all the pain and loss, his journey had been one of meaning and purpose. As the world continues to turn, and as new legends rise to take their place in the spotlight, the memory of Robert Redford endures, not as a distant icon, but as a living presence in the hearts of those who refuse to surrender to despair. His story is a reminder that even in our darkest hours, there is light to be found, and that the greatest legacy any of us can leave is the courage to keep moving forward, no matter the odds. The curtain may have fallen, but the echo of his life will never fade.